Okay, next I'd like to talk about virtual desktop infrastructure. There are a number of different ways in which we can use computers anymore. The most common way, the way you probably use them on a day-to-day basis, is what we would call a thick client, a computer that has its own OS, its own applications, its own hard drive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that has a downside, which is that they aren't as mobile as they maybe need to be. Well, now with Active Directory and roaming profiles, you can more or less put the same desktop anywhere, but fundamentally you're still dealing with a thick client, and if all the files that you need to move around are not integrated with that roaming profile in some way, with say a network drive or roaming storage or whatnot, you still have files in various places. The support costs are also higher because you've got to have lots of fully functional, featured complete machines that can support one or more physically installed OSs. The opposite of that is a thin client, which is that you use a keyboard, mouse, and monitor to connect to another computer somewhere. Um, if you've used, say, AnyDesk or TeamViewer or Remote Desktop or whatnot, that window that is giving you access to a computer somewhere else on the network is essentially a thin client to that computer. Um, a third option is what we would call a virtual desktop. Really and truly, any VM running a desktop operating system is a virtual desktop. So for the Linux course that you may have taken, or the server course, if you were when you built out Windows 10 VMs, or Debian, Kali, Ubuntu, Fedora, or whatnot, all those are virtual desktops, even if they are not sitting on, say, a server platform whose primary function is to project that across the network. Um, well, all this is going in. We're talking about virtual desktop infrastructure. Um, One way of doing this is actually to have all those virtual desktops loaded on a server somewhere, waiting for someone to need them. So that instead of actually logging onto a local computer or logging onto a physical computer of any kind, whether it's local or remote, what they actually do is connect, log into the virtual machine, and use it wherever they are. There's a couple different ways to do this, linked or not linked. With unlinked virtual desktops, all of your desktops are totally separate from each other. Even if they're practically identical, they're all going to be separately configured, separately stored, etc. That can take a lot of space. A linked clone, on the other hand, you have a whole bunch of virtual desktops which are more or less similar to each other, and then there's a file that will tell the hypervisor what changes to deploy for a specific user or a specific context, so that they take that linked clone and they change it a little and they deploy that. So you've got this base image and then the set of modifications you can make to it, and that's what we call a linked clone. Let's look at it. Let's look at a sort of a diagram of it. So we've got, say, a whole bunch. So we've got our hardware platform here. The physical servers, in this case, they look like towers. We've got our virtualization software, in this case, VMware vSphere. So in this case, with virtual desktop, we're really talking about a data center application. Now, the data center application in this case may actually be pushing desktops out instead of virtualizing servers, and that's okay. So we've got vSphere, a bunch of ESXi hosts, possibly controlled using vCenter, and then we've got a VMware View Composer, a parent image, VMware Thin App, and your linked clones, so that you've got a laptop image, you've got a desktop image, you've got a laptop image, a desktop image, maybe a server tower image, and those go into a connection manager, and you deploy those to desktops, thin clients, laptops, even tablets. So let's look at that a little more closely. So we've got VMware and Horizon and View. You'll need VMware Horizon. VMware Horizon is, of course, that's actually, sorry. Yeah, I was about to say VMware Fusion. Sorry. VMware Fusion, of course, is the way your way using VMware to provide to do parallelization, sorry, virtualization on a Macintosh. Anywho, so VMware Horizon software, that's our virtual desktop infrastructure. Um, with if we're, once we're talking about with Microsoft, you need the MedV, Microsoft Enterprise Desktop Virtualization. You can send things out to Microsoft Virtual PC, Windows Virtual PC, which is how things worked for Windows XP and I think Windows 10, sorry, 7, XP and 7, and I think Vista along the way, because there was that horrible thing called Vista between XP and 7. And then you need Windows Server 2012 or better. At this point, really and truly, if you have Windows 2012 Server 2012 platforms, you should be working on getting them out of your enterprise. You should be doing this with 2016 at the minimum, if not 2019. And you need remote desktop services, CAL licensing. Now, licensing is going to be a big thing, so pay close attention to that if you're actually doing this. We're not going to talk about that just yet. You can also do this with Oracle. With their virtual desktop infrastructure, you're going to need enough RAM. You're going to need a Linux or Solaris is technically a Unix. VirtualBox and Oracle's VDI infrastructure. You can also do this with Citrix or ZenWorks. Citrix Zen Desktop or FlexCast and you can actually do this with either with Zen Server or Hyper-V or vSphere. Now, one other thing we can do with this is application virtualization. Not virtualizing an entire OS, but specifically an application. And this is actually how some flavors of Linux, say for example Cubes, handles this. You might also talk about containerization and Docker. These are all various flavors where we're trying to sandbox the application, essentially. These virtual applications won't leave any footprint. You can use ThinApp, Altera Software Virtualization, Microsoft App V. Each app is going to have its own registry and a system file, but essentially these things run in a virtualized environment. When they're done, you close them. So if something happens in there, say for example, there's a malicious file that you open and it's trying to break out, it's going to get stuck in that sandbox. And now I'll talk about cloud environments. Thanks for watching, and I'll be right back.